Dear learner, in this video I am going to discuss about SHERPA RoMEO online resource to check publisher copyright and self-archiving policies. You know, the importance of institutional digital repository has been realized and has increased tremendously during last decade as we are depending more and more on web resources. There are many initiatives, projects and recommendations at national and international levels that support free access to public funded research. Open access means free and unhindered access to scholarly research and other publication by anyone who has access to the internet. You know, the Budapest Open Access Initiative took place in 2001 where the term open access was coined, and the two strategies of green open access, self-archiving, and gold open access publishing were devised. The green route of open access self-archiving is where authors provide open access to their own published articles by making their own e-prints free for all. Institutions such as universities and research organizations can implement either or both, not only to support public access but also preserve the digital research asset of the institution. SHERPA RoMEO also gives the facilities for dissemination of research in the worldwide rapidly. What is open access repository? A repository is a place or container where anything could be kept for safekeeping. But whenever repository is mentioned, books come to mind, especially where librarians are concerned. A library could be linked to a repository where books are stored for safekeeping and easy reference. More recently, a repository is usually associated with digital contents due to the advent of internet. Ideally, a repository ought to be a storehouse of archival content, whereas a digital repository is where digital content and assets are stored and can be searched and retrieved for later use. There are three main categories of repositories as follows. Number 1, institutional repository. Number 2, subject or discipline specific repository. And number 3, data repository. I am going to discuss one by one. First of all, institutional repository. Institutional repositories can refer to as document servers, enabling members of a specific research community to self-archive their research output and to make their research output available to the public without any access barrier. Since these repositories are institutional, content depends on the focus of the institution or organization. An institutional repository can be viewed as a set of services that a university offers to members of its community for the management and dissemination of digital materials created by the institution and its community members. For a university, this includes materials such as monographs, e-prints of academic journal articles, both before preprint or after postprint, undergoing peer review, as well as electronic thesis and dissertation. An institutional repository might also include other digital assets generated by academics, such as data sets, administrative documents, course notes, learning objects, or conference proceedings. Deposit of materials in an institutional repository is something mandated by that institution. Some example of institutional repository: Virginia Tech University Digital Library and Archives, MIT Institutional Repository, and much more. What is the next thing? The subject or discipline specific repository. Subject or discipline specific repository store and provide access to the scholarly output of a particular subject area. For example, an individual discipline. It can be a subject repository within a specific institution, or it can collect discipline in specific research across various institutes. Example of subject repository: CiteShare. It contains academic and scientific paper primarily from computer and information science. Archive. It contains scientific papers in the field of mathematics, physics, astronomy, computer science, quantitative biology, statistics, and quantitative finance. What is data repository? Data repositories are based on same principle as institutional and subject or discipline specific repository, with the only exception that it focuses on providing access to data sets. These data sets can be subject specific or across discipline. A data set is a set of files containing both research data, usually numeric or encoded, and documentation sufficient to make the data reusable. For example of data repositories: Edinburgh Data Share, National Geographic Data Center, etc. Now I am come to the point, the securing a hybrid environment for research preservation and access. Securing a hybrid environment for research preservation and access, that is the SHERPA. The SHERPA project has been set up to encourage change in the scholarly communication process by creating open access institutional e-print repositories for the dissemination of research findings. The project aimed to develop and promote a favorable environment for the UK's research output, namely e-print, to be made available. On the one of the main outcomes was the production of a large body of repository advocacy material that has been widely used by startup repository project. Currently, as SHERPA Plus, the project is aiming to provide a proactive national information point on institutional repositories, offering seminars, courses, email discussion list, among others. The objective of the project is to advise on the building and maintenance of institutional repositories, guidelines on IPR and copyright issues, quality control, collection development policies, business models, and advocacy material to publicize an institution's repository. It aims to set up Open Archive Initiative compliant e-print repositories using e-print software at each of the partner sites. It focuses on development of open archive repositories of research output. The website is www.sherpa.ac.uk. How can SHERPA help researchers? The valid question. The SHERPA offers many services to the research community. RoMEO is one of these services. It provides information on publishers' copyright and archiving policy. SHERPA also offers a new service that combines RoMEO and Juliet. It is SHERPA Fact. There is also another service, SHERPA Fact. SHERPA Fact is a service designed to provide guidance to researchers on whether a journal complies with a funder's open access policies. It offers clear advice on the available options for both open access archiving and publishing routes to allow researchers to make informed decisions on where to publish. The service covers 7 UKRI research councils, the Wellcome Trust, and the Charity Open Access Fund COAF. So what is RoMEO? Rights metadata for open archiving. RoMEO is a searchable database of publishers' default copyright policies regarding the self-archiving of journal articles on the web and in open access repositories. The RoMEO project aimed to find out how the rights status of open access research papers might be communicated digitally through rights metadata. The project focused mainly on copyright issues related to self-archiving reprints. The main aim was to understand stakeholders' needs in relation to intellectual property issues that arise with self-archiving and open access initiative protocol for metadata harvesting. What is it? I will discuss later. What is OAIPM is? I will discuss later. It is a valuable tool for repository managers summarizing the permissions that are normally given as a part of each publisher's copyright transfer agreement. RoMEO argues that the best way of dealing with the important right issues created by the open archives and illustrated by their research is to develop machine-readable metadata schemes compatible with OAI MHP to describe ownership and usage rights in the article and in the metadata itself. There are color distribution of SHERPA RoMEO. The database uses a color coding scheme to classify publishers according to their self-archiving policy. This shows to authors whether the journal allows preprint or postprint archiving in their copyright transfer agreement. The RoMEO color code green, that means it can archive, preprint and postprint or publisher version or PDF. When it is blue, can archive post-print, that is final draft post-referring or publisher version. When it is yellow, can archive preprint, that is pre-referring. When it is white, archiving not formally supported. This is the SHERPA RoMEO homepage. Here you can find that welcome to SHERPA RoMEO. Here you can search the journal or ISSN search or the publisher's name, browse by country or browse by publisher. Is it possible also? The SHERPA Juliet. SHERPA Juliet enables researchers and librarians to see funders' condition for open access publication. SHERPA Juliet is a searchable database and single focal point of up-to-date information concerning research funders' policies and their requirement on open access publication and data archiving. The database contains information about more than 100 funders, mostly from the United Kingdom. For each of them, Juliet indicates their policy regarding self-archiving, open access journals, and archival of research data. Users can suggest update to the records or the addition of a new funder via a form. Form is also available there. This is the home page of SHERPA Juliet. SHERPA Juliet home page. You can search for funders policy and name. Just put the name of the funders. All the policy will be shown in this search. This is the statistics. A Juliet statistic, country wise, how many funders are available in this Juliet database. United Kingdom 79, Canada 15, and India also two funders name is included here. Now come to the another aspect, which is research funder policy. To maximize the dissemination of the research they fund, the grant conditions of funding organizations increasingly require peer-reviewed research output to be made freely available to the public in full at the earliest possible date. These aims can be achieved either by publishing in an open access publication or by archiving publication in an open access repository, or in some cases both options are required. Various funders also have the requirement for archiving the data underlying the published research. Open access archiving. The ideal archiving policy has three parts. Publication must be deposited in a repository providing unrestricted access free of charge. Either the published version or the author's final peer-reviewed version must be deposited. Deposition must take place at the time of acceptance for publication. Open access publishing. Open access journals and hybrid journal may require an additional payment to the publisher for the article to be made open access immediately on the date of publication. For the data archiving policy, funding organizations are also increasingly requiring guarantees to deposit their raw research data in appropriate public archives or stores in order to facilitate the validation of results and further work by the other researcher. The practicabilities of providing access to large dataset can be costly for data archives. Therefore, it is acceptable for the archive to recover the cost of access provision on a not-profit basis. Because it can take some time to write up result after a work has been completed. Policies may allow a reasonable grace period, or during which the original researcher have exclusive access to the data before it has to be deposited in a public archive. The length of such period vary by subject discipline. For instance, 6 months might be suitable for a chemistry project, but an archaeological dig could require several years. The funders group. Some funders have been classified into different groups within Juliet, which allows easier recognition of their common open access policy element. Some funders can be in more than one group. The current group are as follows: Association of Medical Research Charities. These funders support AMRC Open Research, which is a platform for rapid author-led publication and open peer review of research funded by AMRC member charities. Charity Open Access Fund. This is a partnership between 6 health research charities set up to enable open access to the published output of the research they support. It makes funds available to pay the open access publication charges of the partner charities. Europe PMC Funders Group. The funders expect the research they fund to be made available through PubMed Central PMC and Europe PMC as soon as possible, and in any event within 6 months of the journal publisher's official date of the final publication. Now the Plan S funders. These are funders that have endorsed Plan S. What is Plan S? I will discuss later, and are jointly working on its implementation. Research Excellence Framework (REF). Research England manage the REF on behalf of all 4 UK higher education funding bodies: Research England, the Scottish Scottish Funding Council, the Higher Education Funding Council for Wales, and the Department for the Economy, Northern Ireland. Then UK Research and Innovation. This brings together the 7 research council. All are the funders group for research funding. Managing funder policy record. The information in Juliet is updated by the team based on policy review and community contribution. If a funding organization with an open access or data archiving policy is not listed in SHERPA Juliet, they may enlist them via its contact form and may send any updates or feedback to there is an email ID help@jigs.ac.uk. Now important things is Open Archive Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting. What is it actually? The first release of the Open Archive Initiative Protocol for Metadata Harvesting OAI-PMH in January 2001. During that period, the OAI-PMH has emerged as a practical foundation for digital library and institutional repository interoperability. The OAI-PMH support interoperability via a relatively simple two-party model. At one end, data providers employ the OAI-PMH to expose structural data, metadata in various forms. At the other end, service provider use the OAI-PMH to harvest the metadata from data providers and then subsequently automatically process it and add value in the form of services. The OAI-PMH is a low barrier mechanism for repository interoperability. Data providers are repositories that expose structural metadata or structured metadata via OAI-PMH. Service providers then make OAI-PMH service request to harvest that metadata. OAI-PMH is an effective way for complete metadata exchange and sharing. The larger repositories in the world such as OCLC, OAI-Star, OpenDoor, Europeana, etc. bring record using OAI-PMH and allow user to search the records of various institutions in one place. Metadata are exchanged among the data or service provider as XML documents transmitted over HTTP. OAI-PMH focuses on the transfer of metadata between data providers and other common services like metadata searching are outside its scope by its integration with a powerful search engine. Another important aspect is coalition is. On 4th September 2018, a group of national research funding organizations with the support of European Commission and the European Research Council announced the launch of Coalition ACE, an initiative to make full and immediate open access to research publication a reality. It is built around Plan ACE, which consists of 1 target and 10 principles. What is Plan ACE? I will discuss later. Coalition ACE signals the commitment to implement the necessary measure to fulfill its main principle. With effect from 2000 to 2021, 2021, all scholarly publication on the result from research funded by public or private grants provided by national, regional or international research council and funding bodies must be published in open access journal on open access platform or made immediately available through open access repository without embargo. The initiative was born from the cooperation between the heads of the participating research funding organizations like Science Europe, Open Access Envoy of European Commission and Scientific Council of the ERC. But its plan is in September 2018, 11 Science Europe member organizations supported by the European Commission and the European Research Council created coalitions and launched Plan A, an initiative to accelerate the transition to full open access. Plan A requires that recipients of research funding from Coalition A's organization make the resulting publications available immediately without embargoes and under open licenses, either in quality open access platform or journal or through immediate deposit in open repository that fulfill the necessary condition. Science Europe continues to support its member or organization in implementing Plan A and has actively contributed to grow Coalition A into a global movement that is supported by a large number of stakeholders and research communities. The initiative comes from the group Coalition A. This is a group of 15 national research funding organizations and 4 charities. Members include the French National Research Agency, the Irish Science Foundation and UK Research and Innovation. What is the trend principles of Plan A? Authors or their institutions retain copyright to their publication. Number one principle, authors or their institution retain copyright to their publication. All publication must be published under an open license, preferably the Creative Commons Attribution license, in order to fulfill the requirements defined by the Berlin Declaration. Principle 2. The funders will develop robust criteria and requirements for the services that high quality open access journals, open access platform and open access repositories must provide. Number 3. In cases where high quality open access journal or platform do not yet exist, the funders will in a coordinated way provide incentive to establish and support them when appropriate. Support will also be provided for open access infrastructure where necessary. Principle 4. Where applicable, open access publication fees are covered by the funders or research institution, not by individual researcher. It is acknowledged that all researchers should be able to publish their work open access. Principle 5. The funders support the diversity of business model for open access journals and platform. When open access publication fees are applied, they must be commensurate with the publication services delivered, and the structure of such fees must be transparent to inform the market and funders potential standardization and capping of payment of fees. Principle 6. The funders encourage governments, universities, research organizations, libraries, academies and learned societies to align their strategies, policies and practices, notably to ensure transparency. Principle 7. The above principle shall apply to all types of scholarly publication, but it is understood that the timeline to achieve open access for monographs and book chapter will be longer and requires a separate and due process. Principle 8. The funders do not support the hybrid model of publishing. However, as a transitional pathway towards fulfill open access within a clearly defined time frame and only as part of transformative agreement, transformative arrangement. I will discuss later what is transformative agreement or transformative arrangement. Funders may contribute to financially supporting such arrangement. Number 9. The funders will monitor compliance and sanction non-compliant beneficiaries or guarantee. Number 10. The funders commit that when assessing research output during funding decision, they will value the intrinsic merit of the work and not consider the publication channel, its impact factor or other journal metrics or the publishers. This is the train principles of Plan S. So what is transformative agreement? At its most fundamental, a contract is a transformative agreement if it seeks to shift the contracted payment from a library or group of libraries to a publisher away from subscription based reading and towards open access publishing. Principles for transformative agreement typically include a number of components that are related to the transition from subscription based reading to contractually based publishing. Number 1. Cost. Libraries seek transformative agreement to shift from paying subscription to paying for publishing with a goal of furthering movement towards an open access publishing ecosystem. Libraries may also pursue transformative agreement in order to attempt to exert control over rising payment for publishing, particularly under mandates for open access publishing. Number 2. Copyright. Transformative agreement tend to require that copyright be retained by the author and not transferred to the publisher. Though this may be accomplished by the publisher procuring a license to publish, agreement increasingly couple copyright retention with a requirement that the author apply a Creative Commons license to the published article and possibly to the author manuscript version as well. Creative Commons by is very commonly recommended or required. Transparency. Principle for transformative agreements offer insist that the terms of any such agreement be made publicly available. However, though full contracts are sometimes made public, even the most curtailed advocates of open access transformative agreement may only provide an overview of the key component, and this such kinds of transparency will be provided. Then the transitional. As a definition, transformative agreement are transitional in that they seek a pathway for a shift away from payment to read and towards payment to publish. They are predicated on an end state in which subscription-based reading payment is ceased to exist. This end state may not be imminent, but such is the goal. A shift to open access and the concomitant paying for publishing rather than reading. Read and publish versus publish and read. A read and publish agreement is an agreement in which the publisher receives payment for reading and payment for publishing bundled into a single contract. This bundling together brings payment for publishing into a contractual arrangement rather than being addressed ad hoc by individual authors who are choosing open access publishing. In addition to publishing fees being brought under a contractual arrangement, a transformative arrangement seeks to redirect funds previously spent on subscription-based reading to the publishing component, often with a goal of a cost-neutral read and publish agreement in comparison with the previous subscription-based reading agreement. More aggressively, library approaches seek to a decrease in price rather than a cost-neutral approach. However, while some successfully concluded agreement to date may be cost-neutral, others in reality cost more or may not include price caps or control on total potential cost. A publish and read agreement is an agreement in which the publisher receives payment only for publishing and reading is included for no additional cost. Again, the library goal is typically a cost-neutral contract in comparison with the previous subscription-based reading agreement, or perhaps a decrease in price. However, these goals are not always realized. On the publisher side, it may be a distinction without a difference whether a particular contract is a read and publish or publish and read, as long as the resultant total payment is acceptable and does not upend long-term financial viability. Even if revenue declines, some have questions the advisability of these types of agreement, suggesting that they may be unsustainable in the long run. In addition, certain publishers have observed that such contracts are not currently universally desired and that some libraries institutions are unable to fund publication fees. Scholarly communication is paramount in this era, and self-archiving is needed to establish good scholarly communication among authors around the world. Open access and institutional repositories are becoming an obligation to researchers, funders, and publishers. Librarians and academicians need to embrace this trend and get involved in self-archiving and sending the publication to open access journals. SHERPA offers many services to the research community, providing information on publisher copyright and archiving policy based on funders' mandate. SHERPA RoMEO is for publisher copyright policy and self-archiving, and SHERPA Juliet is for searching of research funders' open access policy. Some references I have used for this note, and thank you for your patience.